Some stories aren't meant to be told around campfires. They're too real, too unsettling, and they don't end when the video does. Tonight we uncover 3 true cases, chilling, disturbing, and impossible to forget. If you're drawn to real crimes, unexplained mysteries, and haunting true stories, subscribe to Roadside Tales. Case 1. Bruce Mendenhall. The truck stop killer. The sun hadn't yet risen over the outskirts of Nashville when detectives were called to a grisly scene. A young woman's body had been discovered near a trash bin behind a local truck stop. Her clothes were partially removed, her skin marked by bruises and cuts. There were no witnesses, no surveillance footage showing how she got there. Just another tragedy, perhaps one of many in the long shadows cast by the interstate highways. But this one would not fade so easily. This one would open the door to a horror hidden in plain sight, a man who used the open road not to deliver goods, but to hunt. His name was Bruce Mendenhall. For more than 2 decades, Bruce drove an 18-wheeler across America. He was the kind of man you wouldn't look at twice. Clean-cut, calm-spoken, married, and with 2 daughters. He grew up in Crawford County, Illinois, and had no significant criminal history. To those who knew him, Bruce was ordinary, just another trucker making an honest living. But in June 2007, a surveillance camera caught something that would unravel everything. At a truck stop in Nashville, Tennessee, a 25-year-old woman named Samantha Winters was found murdered. Her body was dumped beside a trash compactor. She had been shot in the head. There were no signs of robbery, and she still wore her jewelry. Police reviewed footage from nearby cameras, and something stood out. A yellow Freightliner truck had been parked behind the stop for several hours and left shortly after the estimated time of death. They put out a notice. 2 days later, at another truck stop in Lebanon, Tennessee, just 30 minutes away, an officer spotted a yellow Freightliner matching the description. The driver was an older man, cooperative, quiet. His name, Bruce Mendenhall. When the officer asked for consent to search the cab, Bruce didn't object. What they found inside was something out of a nightmare. There were bloodstains. Not just 1 or 2, but many, some dried, some fresh. There was a .22 caliber rifle, duct tape, latex gloves, a plastic bag containing women's clothing, a bottle of bleach, rope, zip ties, used condoms, towels with what appeared to be blood, a bloody mattress, and behind the seat a small box with newspaper clippings of missing women. One of the clippings was about Samantha Winters. Bruce was arrested on the spot, but that was only the beginning. In custody, he initially denied everything. He claimed he didn't know who Samantha was, that the blood in his truck came from a cut on his hand, and the other items were just trash. But DNA testing told another story. Samantha's blood was found on multiple surfaces in the truck. And it wasn't just her. The blood of at least 5 other women would later be matched to evidence found inside his cab. Police departments from multiple states, Indiana, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Illinois, began re-examining cold cases involving women found near truck stops. Patterns began to emerge. Most were sex workers. Most were found dumped near rest stops, gas stations, or roadside motels. Most had been shot with a small caliber firearm, and most had vanished within known travel corridors traced through Bruce's fuel logs and toll records. In the following months, Bruce began to talk, not to police but to other inmates and to reporters. In one jailhouse conversation, he allegedly said, "I didn't stop. I couldn't. They were already dead before I got to them. It made no sense." Then he added, "God told me they needed to die." One inmate testified that Bruce claimed responsibility for over 10 murders. He described women he had picked up, taken into his truck, and disposed of in places he no longer remembered. Some details were too specific to ignore. In Illinois, the body of Sarah Hulbert was found just 20 feet from a truck stop in June 2007. She'd been shot in the head, left next to a garbage bin. Her DNA was found in Bruce's truck. He would later admit to meeting her that night. In Indiana, another victim, Lucille Gretna Carter, was found near a rural truck rest area. She too had a bullet wound to the head. Her body bore the same signature bruises and tape marks found on other victims. In Alabama, the remains of another woman dumped behind a rest stop matched a blood sample recovered from Bruce's mattress. Each case had once been considered isolated. Now they were forming a trail, one that crisscrossed the country, linked by highway maps, toll receipts, and gas station timestamps. The truck, it seemed, was the perfect murder weapon. Mobile, untraceable, always moving. Bruce never offered a clear motive. Some believed he targeted sex workers out of contempt. Others suspected he acted out of religious delusion after he spoke repeatedly about cleansing evil from the world. But the real horror lay not just in the killings, but in how long it took to notice. He had likely been active since the late 1990s. For nearly a decade, Bruce drove from state to state with blood on his mattress and murder kits in his drawers. He parked next to families, ate breakfast at diners, smiled at gas station clerks, and then after dark transformed into something else entirely. Investigators later said he likely kept souvenirs from his victims. But many were never identified. Some of the women he mentioned by name were never reported missing. Others may have been buried in shallow graves along highway routes now paved over or lost to time. Eventually, Bruce was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Samantha Winters. He was sentenced to life in prison. Charges in other states were dropped or delayed due to lack of physical evidence, jurisdictional conflicts, or the sheer complexity of proving intent on the move. Today, Bruce Mendenhall sits in a Tennessee prison. He is 73 years old. But some officers believe his true body count could be as high as 30. He never confessed on record. Not in full. He gave just enough to tease. Enough to haunt the families still waiting for answers. Enough to leave gaps. His truck was impounded. Blood was scrubbed. Evidence stored. But for those who know his name, Bruce Mendenhall is more than just a serial killer. He represents something darker, the quiet predator behind the wheel, the stranger in the next lane over the man who waves as he passes and then disappears into the night. A killer who turned the endless highways of America into his own hunting ground. Case 2. Robert Ben Rhoades, the trucking killer. For years, the long-haul highways of America carried more than just freight. They carried fear hidden beneath the quiet hum of tires on asphalt, behind the tinted windows of trucks that never stopped long enough to raise suspicion. Among those trucks, one held a secret darker than most. Its driver was Robert Ben Rhoades, and his cab was a prison. Rhoades began his trucking career in the 1980s, hauling goods across the Midwest and Southwest. Like many drivers, he lived mostly on the road's sleepless stretches of highway roadside diners, nameless towns. But Rhoades wasn't just looking for delivery stops. He was looking for victims. He would later be known by many names: the trucking killer, the roadside predator, and perhaps most chillingly, the basement in a truck, because that's what he built. Behind the driver's seat of his Peterbilt rig, Rhoades had constructed a hidden chamber, a space converted into a soundproof torture room. Inside, handcuffs bolted to the walls, leather restraints gags, electrical cords, and a camera. He referred to it as his playpen. His hunting ground was the interstate system. His targets were often young women traveling alone, frequently hitchhikers or runaways, those no one would miss quickly. His approach was calculated. He would offer a ride, smile, be polite. And once inside the truck, everything changed. The first known discovery that unraveled Rhoades' horrifying trail occurred in April 1990 near Casa Grande, Arizona. A state trooper, Michael Miller, spotted a truck pulled awkwardly onto the shoulder of the highway with its hazard lights flashing. He approached to check if the driver needed help. Instead, he found a scene that stayed with him for life. Inside the cab, a frightened 18-year-old girl was chained to a hook mounted behind the passenger seat. She was partially clothed, bruised, and visibly traumatized. The driver, Robert Rhoades, stood calmly beside her, saying she was his wife and they were just having an argument. The girl quickly refuted that. She had been kidnapped, she had been tortured, and she had no idea where she was. Rhoades was arrested immediately. Inside his truck, investigators found an arsenal of items: knives, whips, cuffs, and most disturbingly, a camera loaded with photographs of young women in distress. One photo in particular would haunt authorities for years. It was of a teenage girl, long brown hair, standing in a barn, her hands bound. Her eyes wide, terrified. She was dressed in black. The photo appeared staged, too deliberate, too composed. The look on her face was one of someone moments from understanding the depth of her fate. Her name was Regina K. Walters. She was just 14. Regina had disappeared months earlier with her boyfriend, Ricky Lee Jones. They had left their small town in Texas hoping for a new life. They were last seen accepting a ride from a truck driver. That driver was Rhoades. According to evidence recovered later, Rhoades killed Ricky shortly after picking them up. He left the body in an abandoned barn in Mississippi. Regina, however, he kept alive for days. It is believed he tortured her mentally and physically before killing her. The black dress in the photo was not hers. He cut her hair, dressed her, posed her, and then ended her life inside the barn where Ricky's body had been found. The chilling photo was likely taken moments before. Police found her remains in the barn months later after Rhoades' arrest, when clues from his truck finally led them there. And Regina was not his only victim. The camera held more images, some confirmed to be other missing women, others still unidentified. Over time, authorities linked Rhoades to at least 3 murders, but suspect he may have been responsible for dozens more. His trucking routes matched unsolved disappearances across Texas, Arizona, California, and even as far as Illinois. In one case, the body of a woman was found near a rest stop with bindings similar to those found in Rhoades' cab. In another, police found a woman's shoe in his truck that matched a missing persons report from New Mexico. But the true number, it may never be known. Rhoades operated for over a decade, often picking up women who weren't reported missing immediately. Young travelers, runaways, people already living on the margins. He used the very nature of trucking, always moving, always between jurisdictions, as a shield. No single police department could see the full picture. Until that one traffic stop in 1990. After his arrest, Rhoades showed no emotion. He didn't deny the allegations. He didn't fight them. He simply didn't speak. It was only in court months later that he offered any explanation, saying little more than, "Some people are just born bad." In 1994, he was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Regina Walters. Years later, he received 2 additional life sentences for other murders. He is currently incarcerated in Illinois without the possibility of parole. But the legacy he left behind still disturbs investigators to this day. One Texas Ranger who worked the case described it as evil with a smile. Another officer called Rhoades one of the most calculating killers I've ever seen, someone who used normalcy as a mask. Even now, cold case units across the country continue to revisit unsolved murders along highway corridors, checking for links to Rhoades' route logs. He never admitted how many he killed, never offered names, never showed remorse. For many, Robert Ben Rhoades became the embodiment of fear on the open road. Not because he was loud or violent, but because he was quiet, predictable, hidden in plain sight. He could have been the driver you waved at in passing, the man who smiled at the truck stop diner, the friendly voice on the CB radio. And behind him in the darkened cab was a world no one ever imagined. Case 3. Keith Jesperson, the happy face killer. The note arrived at the office of a Portland newspaper in 1994. It was anonymous, written in block letters, neat, deliberate. "I killed Tanya Bennett. I beat her to death, raped her, and loved it. Yes, I'm sick, but I enjoy myself too." At the bottom was a crudely drawn smiley face. It wasn't the first letter, and it wouldn't be the last. The man behind the note was Keith Jesperson, later known as the Happy Face Killer. A name that would come to symbolize one of the most twisted combinations of pride and cruelty ever seen in a long-haul trucker turned serial murderer. Jesperson's story began far from the headlines. Born in British Columbia, Canada in 1955, he moved to Washington State with his family at a young age. From early on, there were signs something was wrong. He was large, tall, broad, strong, but socially isolated. His father was abusive. He was teased at school. He developed a fascination with torturing animals and a growing resentment toward people who ignored or mocked him. By his 20s, Jesperson was a full-time truck driver hauling cargo across the western United States. He had the size to intimidate, standing 6'6", nearly 250 pounds, and the quiet demeanor to go unnoticed. He drove for long hours, slept in his rig, and spent nights alone in motels, rest stops, and truck depots. That isolation for Jesperson became opportunity. In January 1990, he met a woman named Tanya Bennett at a bar outside Portland, Oregon. She was friendly, cheerful, and alone. They spoke for a while, and he offered to take her back to his place. She agreed. By morning, she was dead. Jesperson claimed they argued, and he snapped beating and strangling her in a fit of rage. Then he dumped her body down a remote embankment. Days later, she was found by hikers. Her jaw was broken. Her body had been left exposed to the elements. Police initially had no suspects. But then something strange happened. A woman named Laverne Pavlinak came forward. She confessed that her abusive boyfriend, John Sosnovsky, had killed Tanya. The confession was detailed but entirely false. She later admitted to inventing the story to escape her partner. Still, both were convicted. Sosnovsky received life in prison. Jesperson watched the trial unfold from the comfort of his truck cab, and he was furious. Not because an innocent man had been convicted, but because he wasn't getting the credit. That's when the letters started. Jesperson began writing to newspapers, police departments, and even television networks. He described details only the killer would know: Tanya's clothes, the belt he used, how she begged for her life. He ended each letter the same way, with a smiling face. He wanted recognition and attention, and while he waited for someone to listen, he kept killing. Jesperson's victims were rarely connected by age, appearance, or background. Many were sex workers or hitchhikers, often picked up near truck stops or gas stations. He killed them in his rig using his hands, a belt, or whatever was available. Then he would dump their bodies along highways, rivers, or in trash heaps. Some were left where he thought they'd never be found. He didn't try to hide his crimes. He just kept moving. In total, Jesperson claims to have killed more than 160 women, though only 8 have ever been confirmed. He often bragged that no one could stop him because he was always on the move, always a state ahead. In 1992, the body of Lori Ann Pentland was found behind a strip mall in Oregon. She had been strangled. In 1995, Angela Sue Brise's remains were discovered in California. Jesperson had given her a ride, then ended her life when she tried to leave. He dumped her body in a ditch. Some victims he claims he kept with him in the cab for hours, sometimes days, before discarding them. Others were killed in motel rooms, the keys left on the table, the front desk none the wiser. But for all his efforts to gain notoriety, Jesperson remained largely anonymous until he turned himself in. In March 1995, Jesperson was arrested for the murder of his girlfriend, Julie Winningham, a 41-year-old woman from Washington State. They had been dating for several weeks. He suspected she was using him for money. After an argument, he strangled her and left her body beside a rural road. This time, Jesperson felt exposed. Police had questioned him. He was under pressure, and he didn't like it. So he confessed. At first, just to Julie's murder. But once in custody, he began to talk. In a matter-of-fact tone, he detailed the deaths of Tanya Bennett and others. He offered names, dates, locations. He drew maps. He spoke as if recounting errands, not lives, ended. He showed no remorse. In court, Jesperson pleaded guilty to multiple counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He now resides at Oregon State Penitentiary. What disturbed investigators most wasn't just the number of victims, but Jesperson's detachment. He never described himself as evil. He never offered excuses. He spoke calmly and clearly about what he had done as if it were inevitable, just part of who he was. And to this day, many believe his true number of victims is much higher. The highway was his cover. The truck was his world. And inside that world, Keith Jesperson lived as judge, jury, and executioner. He used a smiley face not as a joke, but as a brand, a signature, a quiet declaration of ownership over death. He didn't kill out of passion. He killed out of control. 3 cases. 3 stories that left more questions than answers. And somewhere, the silence still lingers. If these are the stories that keep you watching, stay with us. Subscribe to Roadside Tales, where the truth is never far and the chills never fade.